Think back to the last time you found yourself lost in thought, where you couldn't sleep because your mind was racing or you couldn't sit still. Think about the last time you had to struggle to make eye contact just so you could take in what someone was saying, or read a sentence 5 times because you couldn't focus. Now imagine that these were things that happened to you every second of every day, but you couldn't control them. Now you have a pretty good idea of what it's like to have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. ADHD, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, manifests itself in 3 basic forms, or subtypes. These include predominantly inattentive, which is generally characterized by difficulty focusing, predominantly hyperactive impulsive, which is generally exhibited by restless and impulsive behavior, and predominantly combined, which is both. Of these 3 subtypes, the most marginalized and overlooked is the inattentive form of ADHD. In general, people are more familiar with the hyperactive impulsive form because its presence in classes is more noticeable and because of Rick Riordan's fiction series on hyperactive demigods. Still, the inattentive form of ADHD is much less widely known and is often missed. While there have been no studies specifically on the percentage of inattentive diagnoses that there is widely agreed to be the least commonly diagnosed. It is generally acknowledged that males are more predominantly hyperactive impulsive and combined, whereas females are more predominantly inattentive. Thus, the ratio of 3:1 for males to females just gives us an idea of how easy it is to miss. Even the way that the disorder is organized as a subtype rather than a separate disorder, as it used to be, gives us an idea of just how much it is missing from the public's eye. The fact is, the nature of the predominantly inattentive subtype of ADHD makes it much harder to spot. It's harder to realize that the distracted girl staring off into space has an issue when she's sitting next to the impulsive boy who can't sit still. After all, the person who can't focus for long periods of time and moves through assignments slower just doesn't care enough. The person with a shorter attention span, who's constantly being pulled off task, just has a poor work ethic. It's easy to look at these people and to believe that their issues are their fault, rather than a mental disorder. The thing is, it's not always a choice. Many of us do care. When I was 10 years old, partway through my 5th grade year, I was diagnosed with an inattentive form of ADHD, and it changed my life. There was a reason. There was a reason that I was different. There was a reason that my homework took twice as long. But it wasn't until my teacher recognized my symptoms that I finally learned that reason. In elementary school, even before my diagnosis, I was aware that I was struggling, but I didn't know why. All I saw was my classmates finishing their homework without the stress and in half the time it takes me. And yet, I didn't want to point out that I was different. Whenever anyone asked me why homework took so long, I brushed it off, saying that I'm just a perfectionist or that it takes me a little longer, but I always do good work. Now I've made peace with my disorder, but the fact remains that people shy away from this topic of mental disorders. This shyness, this discomfort, means that there are many people who are struggling under the unseen weight of this disorder, all because they're afraid, like I was, of being rejected. A big part of this feeling comes from this unspoken understanding that children are to do their homework and go through life quietly. If they have a problem, deal with it. But the unseen effects are there. Women with ADHD often experience depression, anxiety, and low self-esteem due to the stressful and ostracizing nature of this disorder. And because of these tendencies for co-occurring disorders, these individuals are often diagnosed, treated, and medicated for these rather than ADHD. A study done by Astrid J. Lundervold on the coexistence of ADHD and depression found that of those who participated, more than 20% of the adolescents defined as depressed qualified for a diagnosis of ADHD. In addition to depression, people with ADHD are more likely to commit suicide. According to a study done by the Karolinska Institute in Sweden on suicide rates among people with ADHD, they found that 9.4% of them had attempted suicide, as well as 6.6% of their parents and 3.4% of their siblings. It is clear that our present reaction is not working. Society rejects the idea of labels like ADHD under the guise that it will cause people to become compartmentalized. While this is a valid enough concern, it's not the real problem. The real problem is the fact that people are afraid of the controversy and stigma that surrounds the labels they are given. For all our talk of compartmentalization, as soon as a label is given, it is immediately turned into something that is ugly. Despite the fact that over 11% of children in the United States were diagnosed with a form of ADHD as of 2013, there are still many people who regard it as something that simply does not exist. It is written off as people who are pretending because they are lazy or so that they can use it as an excuse. All of this stems from the current lack of understanding and awareness of ADHD. This is why I propose that schools and school districts work towards increasing the levels of awareness and understanding of ADHD and the problems it presents. We need to work together as a community to create better feelings towards the topic of mental disorders, instead of demonizing them or shunning their existence. A diagnosis or a label doesn't have to be a bad thing. In fact, it is necessary in order to help those who are struggling. More than that, though, by making ADHD into something that is weird and different, we have created this environment where children are struggling and they aren't going to talk to anyone to get the help that they need. Now, the root of the problem is currently this combination of the lack of understanding and the overall feelings of discomfort that come with the topic of ADHD, as it means that there are many instances where it is being misdiagnosed, missed altogether, or purposely hidden due to this need to fit into society's ideals and expectations. There are many people who do not have a complete or proper understanding of what ADHD is, while others are not aware of it at all. Before my diagnosis, I had no idea what ADHD was, or that it even existed. If my teacher had not recognized my symptoms, I may still not know. More and more adults every year don't discover that they have ADHD until later in life, and it leaves them to wonder, what would I have been capable of doing if I had known sooner? ADHD can be an uphill struggle. It causes so many people to choose the path of least resistance. I believe that it was only through the help and support I received from my parents and teacher, mixed with a fair amount of stubbornness on my part, that I abstained from going down that path myself. Throughout the 6 years since my diagnosis, I have developed many little tricks to help myself stay focused and organized. For example, I maintain direct eye contact during a conversation in order to make sure that I take in everything. Also, I keep a detailed list of everything I have to do each night and what order I should do it in. I found that listening to music while I do homework helps me focus by providing background noise. However, before you can work on developing these little coping mechanisms, we need to know what we're dealing with. To accomplish this, there are many different ways that schools and school districts can help by increasing the levels of understanding. For example, schools can help by inserting a section on mental disorders to the elementary school health class curriculum. This would be particularly beneficial because this is the age where it generally begins to appear in students, and it would give children a proper understanding from an early age. Plus, there are many schools who are starting to participate in the ADHD Awareness Month in October. Formally recognizing it would send the message that ADHD is not something to cover up in shame, but is something to be celebrated as part of who we are. This would give students a proper understanding of what their peers are going through, subsequently making them more open and accepting of the topic of ADHD. By creating a more open environment, students will not only feel more comfortable talking to people to get the help that they need, but they will be better able to recognize and accept that they are different and that this is okay. This comfort will increase the likelihood of a proper diagnosis so that people will be able to turn their attention, limited though it may be, towards learning to live with ADHD. ADHD is a lifelong disorder. I will never get rid of it. But that does not mean that it has to be a lifelong sentence. Through better education, we can better ensure that no child has to go through this struggle alone. Thank you.